how do we bridge the gap between what's in our hearts of trying to do something good and then making sure that we don't make things even worse?
Howdy doodle 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 do. Howdy doodle 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 do.
Howdy everybody. We're here in the area where we planted the cuttings the other day, and we're looking to see if things are going along well, and it turns out that they are. Lena's going to take some close-ups of the Moreira, the Cameroon grass, Botón de Oro, to show you that some of these grasses are sprouting and are going in the direction that we want them to. At the same time, I want to tell you about an article that I read the other day about an evaluation of a large project called the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. Now, this was funded by a consortium of funders, but the primary ones were the Gates Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation. And this was a project in Africa that had simple but profound goals. One was to increase the output of crops, to increase the production, and the other was to increase the income of farmers, which would in turn help increase their quality of life. So about $1 billion was invested in this project over 5 years, and there was recently a 5-year evaluation. That typically is what goes on with these type of programs. There's an evaluation every 5 years to see if things are going in the direction that they want. It turns out that the evaluation indicated that things were not going in the direction that they wanted. So as we're examining things here, I wanted to take a few minutes to address why it is that well-intentioned efforts, now I'm not here to trash foundations or non-governmental organizations or anything like that. They do good work, many of them do. But many times these well-intentioned efforts don't succeed. And if they do succeed, it's only a short success. They don't endure over time. So I wanted to take a few minutes to simply explore why that is. Here are some shots of Cameroon grass sprouting. You'll remember that this is the type of grass that we planted horizontally. So we laid it down in the ground like a bed. And these are the sprouts. You can see with the arrows here, these are the sprouts that are coming up. This last one here shows a sprout coming right out of the end of one of those pieces that we put in the ground. Okay, now we're a little bit farther up in the planting area where we planted these cuttings, and we had to change our strategy a little bit for a couple of reasons. One was that we were running out of time. We wanted to get the stuff in the ground. And then number two was that we had 2 guys come here to help us out, and we wanted them to focus on the hardest part of the job. And the hardest part of the job was planting the Cameroon grass. And so we did plant the Cameroon all through here. And then starting back here, we planted a long row of the Botón de Oro that's coming all the way. It's following the fence here and going all the way up to the top there where the fence is. So if you remember, we were planting kind of in horizontal rows where we had, one Moreira, one Botón de Oro, one Cameroon, and one Cubano. It turned out that didn't work. And so we had to abandon that approach and use this other approach in lieu of being certain that we could plant everything in a reasonable amount of time and we wouldn't lose too much material in the process. So back to the issue with the Gates Foundation. Now, all of these projects, like AGRA, have an inherent weakness and problem. And that is that there's a beginning and an end to the project. In other words, the funding doesn't continue forever. And that creates an environment where you're trying to get quick and fast results. And that is not always the best approach. So I think we need to understand from the beginning that there's an inherent problem with these type of projects, and that is that you may have 5 years of funding, you may have 3 years of funding, and you got to accomplish a lot in those 3 years, and you have to show that you accomplished a lot, and that is not always an easy thing to do. So I think we need to balance our critique here that there was a failure with the challenges of doing this type of project in the first place. Okay. So with that said, most of these projects also have a signature, and that's why they fail. And that signature is that they use a top-down approach. Now, the top-down approach is somewhat inherent to the fact that there's a limited amount of time for the funding. You want to have the maximum effect, so you go with the people who you think can give the biggest effect. But the top-down approach doesn't typically help the people that you're focusing on, and that's the big problem. And this project, AGRA, is no exception. If you look at the people that they funded, now the Gates Foundation doesn't actually do the work themselves. They grant other people to do the work. So they have a goal, they have a bunch of advisors and what have you, and then they fund other people to do the work. And if you look at the people that received the grants, as they mentioned in this article, they were all industrial people that supply industrial fertilizers, suppliers of pesticide and herbicide, suppliers of specialized hybrid seeds. Research institutions got grants. There were some local farm groups that also got grants. Governments got grants, but the large proportion of the grant money went to the top-down people and never really impacted the people that they intended to in a major positive way. Instead, many of the small farmers that they targeted wound up selling their possessions so they could survive, and then finally selling their land entirely and leaving farming entirely. And that definitely was not the outcome they were looking for. One of the people that participated in the project commented, she said it was like a second wave of colonization. That's what it felt like to her, a second wave of colonization. And colonization is a thing to think about here for a minute, because the colonial mindset, the outsiders who come in with the good intentions and everything, they're coming with an attitude, look, we have the resources and we have the knowledge, and we're not going to waste our resources, so you're going to have to follow our plan. The people who are local have a completely different attitude. Their attitude is, wow, we've seen this about 100 times before. There's all of these church groups come, all of these other groups come, non-governmental organizations, they're all coming saying that they want to help us. They wind up helping themselves more than they help us. And that creates a lot of distrust, a lot of skepticism. The number one response to colonization is passive aggressiveness. It's the only thing you can do. You smile, you say yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am, and you do what you think, you tell people what you think you want them to hear, and then as soon as they leave, you go on and do your own thing anyway. And that doesn't help anybody, so we have to recognize these things. Here are some examples of the Moreira cuttings that are budding. Now remember, this is just the first step. Just because they're budding doesn't mean that they're going to survive. They have to set roots, and that's a longer process that we'll have to monitor, and hopefully that'll happen and we'll have the good plants. Here are some examples of sprouting in the Cuban grass. And if you look really closely, you could see a little green sprout coming up. And what looks like the rest of it is dead material. All the rest of that will die, and the sprout will grow and take the place of the dead material. How do we bridge the gap between what's in our hearts of trying to do something good and then making sure that we don't make things even worse by our good intention? You know, the old saying is that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. In many cases, this turns out to be the case because we think, well, you know, we could just throw a lot of resources at a problem and that'll solve it. It usually doesn't. Now we have a great example of how to approach this. And this is from Amman, Jordan, where Jeff Lawton has a special demonstration site called the Greening the Desert Project. And you can search for this on YouTube, and there's a number of videos about it. But this project is exactly the right way to approach this. So Jeff didn't come in and say, oh, I have a lot of expensive hybrid seeds that I want you to plant. No, he didn't do that. That's what this other project, AGRA, did. AGRA also put money into research to do soil testing, and all of that's fine, but soil testing for the purpose of being able to better target the type of fertilizer that you're going to use. Jeff didn't do any of that because most people that they're trying to target in Africa don't have the money to spend on that stuff. And even if you provide it to them temporarily, they're not going to be able to continue it. And so what Jeff did instead was he created a small demonstration site. He gives permaculture design certificate courses there to anybody who's interested and wants to. But the purpose of the demonstration site is for people in the community to see how that site has changed over time and how productive, how abundant everything is on that site. And you look around, there's that site with all kinds of fruit trees and lots of production, and you look next door and it's like a desert. You look over here, it's like a desert. All surrounding it, it's still like a desert. And you say, oh, they must have done something special. Well, actually, what Jeff did was he taught people to use the resources that they already have to improve their situation using permaculture techniques. That is the way to go with this. That is the way that you're going to be able to sustain a project like this beyond the point when you have to leave. When the funding goes away and you have to leave, you'll be able to sustain it. Now, Jeff's been there for more than 10 years. I think they may be moving into 12, close to 15 years in the Greening the Desert now. I'm not absolutely sure about it. But the point of the matter is that he's in it for the long haul, and he's purposely not trying to benefit large corporations and industries, helping them get a foothold in the area. He's purposely not doing that. He's helping people to use the resources that they already have. And that is the using the permaculture techniques. And that is really the secret to this. If you want to be successful at these type of interventions, that's the way to go with it. You get a small demonstration site, or you find a farmer, one of those small farmers that's about ready to sell his land, and say, hey, let us come in and help you. We're going to make this a demonstration site so other people in the community can come and see how it's working. And that will gently and gradually diffuse over time out into the community. It takes some time, but once it gains momentum, then it really starts diffusing very quickly. Once it gains momentum, but it takes a little time for the momentum to get there. So with that, if you like these videos, please click the like button. That helps me a great deal because YouTube uses that as their primary measurement to see if the video is popular or not. And they show it to other people based upon whether people click the like button. And if you like the content that we're doing, please click the subscribe button. So with that, I'll see you in the next video.